Hello, everybody. This is Acacea Lewis, and I am here today with Acacea Lewis, and we're going to be doing a quick introduction to the main talk that you all came to see or waiting for the recording because we missed some of Acacia's introduction. So without too much faff, I'm going to go straight to Acacia. Acacia, tell us your name, what you do, and introduce yourself to everybody.
Hello, my name is Acacea Sherman Lewis. I have been working on healing myself pretty much my whole life, but thank you so much, Acacea, for introducing me. Thank you so much for putting on this amazing event. I'm really grateful. I had an amazing time in person for all of you who saw me in person. So this isn't going to be an exact same intro so when I gave it before, but I put a little bit more time and effort into it. So I hope that this happens for a good reason. Yeah. So early in my childhood history, I started recognizing that I had Bartholin's disorder. This is something I talked about at the event. I also, as I reached puberty, I started having extremely painful and heavy periods, but I didn't know what endometriosis was.
Can I ask you what Bartholin's is?
Bartholin's is when you have a tumor that is on the outside of your genitalia. That's a blocked sweat gland. Sometimes they can be tumors that are malignant and spread. Sometimes they can be cysts. Mine was more like a cyst, but it kept growing twice in size every year as I got older. Ooh. So by the time I was like 13, it was very prominent in size. It was like the size of a date, like this big. And then when I had gotten to about age 17, it completely blocked my vaginal opening. And so pretty much my whole life until I was about 25, I couldn't have any penetrative sex. So it really affected how I felt about sexuality. It really affected how I felt about women's issues, because along with having excruciatingly painful periods, to the point of not being able to work, not being able to go to school. There are some days where I would just, be on the bathroom floor, curled around the toilet, hugging it for hours, off of, bunches of pain meds. I'd be taking tons of Advil, tons of Tylenol. I knew it wasn't normal, but I was terrified because every time I went to the doctor, they wanted to take something out of me. And that included my uterus, that included the Bartholin's. They wanted to do open surgery. And they said, oh yeah, well, the risk is if we do surgery on you, it could come back. Wow. And so for me, it was a matter of really grave responsibility to myself that I didn't want to be sterile. I wanted to have a baby. I still want to have a child. I didn't want to sleep with a man and get injured worse, because every time I slept with a man at that time, especially once I hit the legal age, it was extraordinarily painful. It was painful inside, it was painful outside. So, really nothing, unless it was really small and short, could go in there. That's partially why I only dated women, until I was like age 21, 22, because I didn't want, the shame of a man seeing me and saying, okay, this is definitely not right. Why you have like a ball sack like a man, And that's what it looked like, for a long time. And so, for me, it was a lot of dysphoria about my body. And the mushroom, as a teenager, if I hadn't taken the mushroom at an early age, I most likely would have continued with killing myself. I had started the process of getting ready to take my own life, and the mushroom interrupted that process completely for me. What it did was it inspired me to look for the solutions that were right in front of my face. It didn't take so long till I started changing my diet. So I started thinking about my smoking habits and how that was affecting my womb. So I was thinking about my sugar cravings and stuff. It took me a while to really change that. I was talking to a young man in the audience who was really nice. He was a Kambo practitioner, and he asked me to talk more about Kambo around this part, because it was Kambo medicine that helped me cure my Bartholin's and bring it to a head. By the point, that I started Kambo, you could fit pretty much this in the side of my vulva. This is how engorged and enlarged it was, with tissue that was fibrous and dense. It was like touching a rock. Wow. It was hard. Yeah. and it hurt to sit because whenever I would sit or try to ride a bicycle, it would start getting smashed and
Ooh.
inflamed. Whatever bacteria was inside it kept, coming out, and it would get really swollen. So I'd be
Mm.
sitting there not being able to, really be comfortable, trying to do medicine work. And it just had gotten in my way, for many years. It was small enough to where I could still take mushrooms and be comfortable. But, as you know, physical illnesses, after a while, they become the focal point of your trips, and you
Yeah.
really have to deal with it. And so it was really the mushroom rather than the doctors, rather than my parents. My mom took me to a doctor when I was like 13, when it was still smaller, and she wanted to remove it and stuff. And I told my mom, no, I don't want them cutting on me. And shortly after that, I started to leave home. Let me go ahead. And I've only got like 600 megabytes left of data, so I'm going to try to kind of hurry up a little bit.
Totally.
For me personally, in my journey, the plant medicines that were the biggest help were the nightshades at first. I tried something called flying cream at first after Cambo to ease the pain, because I could no longer do like bottles of aspirin, I was going through a bottle a day of Advil. I was literally on the verge of killing myself with pain meds. And absolutely vomiting, absolutely like my brain was gone. I was like an animal, on the floor, drooling, vomiting, unable to go to the bathroom or defecate for a week, of every month. I'd have to prepare for that week like I was preparing for like some sort of war. I told the audience, women are the only true superheroes that exist. We are able to birth so much life when we have in our bodies the capability to produce life with the assistance of male semen, with the assistance of the male seed. And that is the biggest superpower that exists on the planet, is the ability to channel through an entire spiritual intelligence into our wombs and out of our bodies is huge. And at that time I was afraid to have a child, because I thought, okay, if this is bad, they said that having a baby is like 10 times worse than menstrual cramps, it's going to kill me. I'm going to die. That's what I thought, because I was like, okay, I'm already on the verge of death every time I have my period. I think that, I basically have to get my house in order. And that's what endometriosis can be for people who are having it severely. You're bleeding out of your anus, you're bleeding out of your vagina, you're vomiting, you're in excruciating pain. It's waves of nausea, it's waves of physical pain. And so for me, the first thing, Cambo helped me change my diet. But it wasn't the Cambo itself that helped me cure endometriosis. It was the diet change. And I know this for sure, because as soon as I started doing Cambo, the dermaceptin in the Cambo started killing yeast. And I've been having yeast infections since I was like 14 years old, even before I started having sex. And that was because I was eating a lot of sugary bread, white bread, starch, putting butter on bread and then adding sugar and cinnamon and putting in a microwave when I was in college. Being a teenager in college sounds great to some people, but for me, like having lived it, it was terrible, because I was away from my parents cooking. I didn't want to ask them for anything. I didn't want their help. And so I started feeding myself the worst possible combinations of foods. I would eat pork rinds and be drinking schnapps on the porch, drinking alcohol and stuff, as a teenager. And so I quit drinking before I actually reached the legal age. I was a troublemaker, and so it was that addiction to yeast from the alcohol, from the beer, from the bread, and getting terrible yeast infections to the point that my whole body was infested. I'd have, white tongue, a white stool, dripping white discharge. And so for me, the Cambo helped me cut all yeast forming substances out of my life. But it wasn't until after I started cutting those things out of my diet that I started finding probiotics, like fermented foods, kombucha. I had a kombucha addiction. If I'm not careful, I got 10 bottles of kombucha, but that's monoseeding your intestinal flora. And my friend Ash, who was in the audience during this lecture, she had told me before, she said, what's going to happen when everyone's doing GTs, which is basically, the biggest brand of kombucha, the Synergy brand, in the United States, at least. She's like, everyone's monoseeding their gut with lactobacillus bacteria. And that's not good, because the bacteria is also sending hormones to your brain, and it controls your intelligence and your monosynaptic movement, how fast you can move, how fast you can think, and so if the only solution we have is doing kombucha or other things and not knowing how to seed our gut with hyper intelligent soil loving bacteria, because it really is the Bacillus subtilis species of bacteria that are in Korea and China and places where they make fresh kimchi. I was telling people, the audience, if you can learn how to give fellatio, you can learn how to make kimchi. You know what I mean? Like, women will spend the time learning the things that they think they need to survive. And it's really important for you to learn how to make wild crafted fermented foods. You know, in my little cookbook, I'm probably going to include some basic instructions on how to make some quick sauerkraut over a couple weeks, how to make some fermented cabbage. My mom made a lot of cabbage, and that's macrobiotic. Macrobiotic foods are creating the right environment for your gut to have the right good gut bacteria and good gut flora that you need to have a clean, healthy vagina. And then there are the plants that help to repair the stomach lining. And so I made it a 4-part process to heal endometriosis. Number 1, clean the mind, because whatever you're holding on to in your womb, when we hold the ankh, the Egyptian ankh that has an opening and like a penis shape at the bottom, this is the womb and the lignum. So you have the womb connected to the lignum here. And so when you have this womb and you have the lignum, you've got to visualize. You don't even have to have an ankh. You can just do this kind of this mudra where you open up a space in your womb and you hold it like this and you visualize. You put your center of your awareness here and you just play like a psychic doctor, like you're playing an operation game. You're trying to visualize what kind of debris is in your womb, what kind of sickness and illness, you know, who you've been attracted to, what kind of toxic thoughts you've thought about them. I want him to fuck me this way, or I want him to do this to me, or whatever. That all collects. And so it's going into that inner darkness, it's going into that duat and cleaning it out with your mind thoughts. So going into your inner higher self and using the power of your mind to release those accumulated energies that are attached to your inner wisdom and to your inner darkness. And a lot of women get stuck in this darkness and get depressed because in that darkness are secrets, in that darkness is shame, in that darkness is guilt, in that darkness is suffering. And then that breeds disease, that breeds cancer, that breeds fibroid tumors, that breeds PCOS because it's stagnant. And so it's really important that we as women learn how to massage our own wombs, how to use rose oil, neroli, orange oil, lotus oil, and massage our wombs deeply and send that healing energy into our inner duat, into our inner womb. Because in that space, it's the absolute. That's the creator comes through that space to help us birth in that space actual literal children, actual life. And so men do not have that womb inside that space, you know? And so it's really important that when you're doing womb work, that you are cognizant of the fact that if you've got discharge that's stinky, etc., that's coming from your gut. That's not coming from your womb. That's trickling down. When the large intestine is right up against the uterus and it's inflamed, then anything that you're eating, like I gave the analogy of Chinese takeout. You ever left Chinese takeout in a foam box on a table for overnight? If you're not emitting, if you're not able to shit, if you're not able to emit, then all of that stinky, nasty food that's trying to ferment and digest and break down is going to be sending bacteria or odor to your yoni, to your vagina. And that's why many men, the conscious community say, oh, if you're not vegan, then, you know, you've got a fishy vagina. And that's actually the truth for a lot of women who are eating a lot of raw meat or a lot of stinky seafood, etc., but aren't using like prunes or dates or pomegranate to help themselves flush out the toxins or flush out the bad bacteria from the food that has to literally rot in the gut for it to be digested. So during this process of cleansing, avoiding cheese, dairy, milk, unless it's raw, because raw milk is actually probiotic, whereas pasteurized milk is basically cooked. And so you're drinking like cooked bacteria, and it's not really that good for you. You know, as a lot of people have a lot of nasty things to say about dairy. I'm not going to overcomplicate it or go into theories. I'm just saying that if you want to avoid candida yeast, then you should probably stop giving it the components that it needs to grow in your gut and start making a home for the bacteria that eats and attacks it, you know, to have a home in your gut, which is the soil loving bacteria, which comes from fresh vegetables that are picked in the soil, and you're not washing it with hard water. You know, you're using soft water or alkaline water to wash the vegetables, and you're still leaving a little bit of dirt on there. That's why it's so important to be a gardener and to grow your own food, because then you have full access to that wild bacteria that will protect you from viruses in your immediate vicinity. Because when a virus comes out, there are bacteria in the ground and the earth that are there to combat it, to help take it out.
Yeah.
And so it's really important, to do a colonic. You don't have to do Cambo medicine, which causes you to vomit and to purge intensely. Cambo is a frog and a mucus on the back of the frog, and a lot of it's not collected ethically. There's a lot of recklessness in the Cambo medicine community that I won't really speak on here, but I will say that if you go and get a colon cleanse, and then you flush your body out, not with a juice fast. Juice fasting can be very risky for someone who suffers from endometriosis because we already have low iron. So, if you can't stop eating meat, don't stop eating meat. You don't have to guilt yourself into quitting eating meat. It's just a matter of you digesting the meat and having a stomach that can actually cook with the right amount of acidity the products that you're eating, so it can sterilize that. We have hydrochloric acid in our guts. So having a gut that's too cold from drinking a bunch of fruit juice all day and day with a bunch of sugar in it is not good. It's just as bad as eating meat all day, every day. Too much of anything is a bad thing. And so when we look online, we see, oh, it's supposed to juice cleanse, oh, it's supposed to do this. Actually, just eating a few papaya seeds can really help with your digestion. Eating a spoonful of ginger and turmeric can really aid in your digestion. And it will also remove the inflammation from your wound that's taking place when you have endometriosis. So if you grind up some fresh turmeric, grind up some fresh ginger, add some honey to that, and then make a spoonful of that. Within about 15 to 20 minutes, you'll notice an immediate effect, doing nothing else but that. And if you take slippery elm bark or gorentula, both create a mucus membrane that's inside the uterus that helps it to naturally start disintegrating those fibers and connections that your body is making between the colon, the walls of the intestines, and the walls of the uterus. It's really important. And for me, it's the matter of cleaning the mind, cleaning the gut, sealing the gut with the plants that have the viscous or mucus-like texture that helps to line the gut, and it also helps the fibers of endometriosis to break up. And also, if you have fibroids, it's also helping with the fibroids, the gorentula, because the fibroids are compounded fibrous tissue that is forming knots. You don't want someone to burn off or cut off those fibroids. What you want is for those knots to relax, and for the anti-inflammatories from the herbs and from your eating habits to stop the inflammation. And once the inflammation stops, your body will naturally reabsorb that fibroid tissue, and it will heal those ulcerated wounds over time. It's going to take 6 to 8 months for you to really heal your fibroids. But plants like slippery elm, gorentula, Acacea Fatima, Labia pumila, even though you're going to be very aroused all the time, if you can get comfortable with your arousal, then that will also help you produce the lubricant that will create the healthier state for your womb to heal from those fibroids. There are studies that show 10% and 30% fibroid shrinkage rate from just those 2 plants I mentioned.
Wow.
And that's why I mentioned those, even though there's a ton of Vitex, Accelera, cherry, red clover that I mentioned otherwise. Some of those are phytoestrogenic. Acacea Fatima is phytoestrogenic, but gorentula is not, meaning that if you have PCOS and you can't take estrogenic herbs, you can take gorentula pretty safely without it triggering an even worse reaction from there being too much estrogen in your body, okay? So that's why I mentioned gorentula, because it was safer for me, because I had a little bit of polycystic ovarian syndrome myself, even though it was undiagnosed. I could tell by the facial hair and the hormones that I was developing PCOS, and I was able to catch it early with the gorentula and prevent myself from developing a full beard, which is something that could happen, with PCOS due to the hormones.
Right. Well, thank you so much, and we shall see you again soon.
Absolutely. See you again soon. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Who declined to tell me until that age that that's what had happened. So I was wondering why I was developing cervical issues at such a young age, because I had contracted HPV as a young girl. And so for me personally, the dermaceptin in Cambo is pretty much what saved me from having to have my cervix removed. I remember feeling inside myself and finding that there were different hard nodules on top of my cervix, and I was terrified of them. And then I had a complete outbreak where you have an HPV outbreak that looks very much like herpes, and you have very many warts all over your lower region. And so when I started doing Cambo, that was the first time that outside of homeopathic medication, I found something that had an immediate effect on how I was feeling down below. Immediately, I started feeling as if there was discharge coming out of me that was abnormal on my period. It felt like there were chunks of tissue that were breaking free inside of my womb. And I was very excited about that. Even though it was painful, that was the first time I ever got any endometrial relief, was working with Cambo. But what happened along with Cambo is that dermaceptin from the Cambo frog started killing Candida yeast inside my body. In the Amazon rainforest, Candida yeast is considered almost like an entity. It's in your tongue, it's in your palate, it's in your cheeks, it's in your eyes, it's in your brain, it's in your gut. So anytime you get stressed out, you know what it wants to do? It wants to keep you frustrated, angry, and a sugar maniac. That's what Candida needs to be, have a nice environment inside your body as a host. And it creates parasitic bundles that look a lot like worms. You'll find different bundles of Candida inside of your gut and your small intestine that look like, squid, kind of. And a lot of women see these entities in their trips. They're like, I see this thing with all these tentacles flapping around inside my trip, and it's attached to me, and I've got to throw it up, And when you throw it up, you feel better. And the only way that that can exist is that if we have an eye into our inner bodies on some level when we are taking psilocybin mushrooms. That these reports of parasites that match the descriptions of real parasites that you had no idea existed before having a mushroom ceremony are indicative that something real may be happening in the spiritual experience of release. And when you let go of the Candida, literally, it's like the weight has been taken off your brain, because those Candida yeast bacteria were causing your brain to lose serotonin and GABA, etc., every time you stopped eating sugar. So the natural alkaloids that your brain needs to function were being starved from your brain every time you started fasting, every time you started getting just a little bit better. You would immediately get triggered to become stressed out. Cortisol would be sent to your brain, the fight or flight drugs, basically, that would make you say, oh, I've got to make a problem. And making problems is what a lot of women end up doing in order to just survive. Because once you've made up the problem and you've solved it and you've eaten something, now you feel better. But eventually you have to figure out, well, where does this come from? If there's really no problem and I'm the crazy one, then where is this process coming from? And the problem is, a lot of us want to be so proud of not being the crazy one that we're not willing to actually look under a microscope inside of our own eating and daily behavior habits and say, what are we doing every single day at this time, and how can we change it? For me, it was waking up late. I wake up at 9 a.m. and I eat late. I eat some sugary snack late at night just so I could sleep. And that would give me a rush of serotonin and GABA, so my whole body would relax and I'd just be so happy. I'd eat my little night snack. Probably be a Kind bar, something that they advertise as organic and healthy just to make my brain feel good about eating sugar. But it has syrup in it, has corn syrup in it, etc. Doing a Candida cleanse is actually very easy. You don't need Cambo. You don't need to go get burned in Mexico or the Amazon rainforest to go through a Candida cleanse. All you got to do is find some African wormwood. And you'll take that wormwood, put it in Everclear alcohol, let it steep for 6 months, and then just swish your mouth out with it every time you brush your teeth. And within 24 to 48 hours, it'll go in and clean out all the yeast inside of your gut without you having to actually ingest any wormwood internally. You're just coating the mucosa, and that's going to start killing the Candida yeast in your mouth every night, and eventually it's going to start going down your digestive tract in small amounts and killing the Candida yeast off. The cranberry juice is not going to keep it at bay all the time. My friend and herbalist, Ash Ritter over here, we were talking in the car. She said something about GTs. What's going to happen if everyone's drinking kombucha to keep their yeast down? And we are mono-seeding our guts with 1 or 2 kinds of bacteria, which is lactobacillus, which is found in yogurt. Eating yogurt and drinking cranberry juice are not going to solve your fibroid problems in the long run. What it's going to take is taking antibacterial herbs, making serious dietary and lifestyle changes on the long term in order for you to get to a point of relief. because your anger issues and your mood swings are all also related to how much sugar intake you're having, and that's directly related to the bacterial balance in your gut and what hormones are being sent to your brain and triggering an emotional response. Women are right, we are being blackmailed. But we're being blackmailed on a cellular level by the foods that we are eating and our lifestyle. So when we're taking the mushroom, it's really important to ask those questions. Why am I distracted? Why can't I think straight? Why don't I have my memory? Why am I not clear if you're not clear? Because if you don't ask those questions to the mushroom, you could just see some things that are not related in any way to your healing and whatnot. The mushroom is not going to heal you for you. You must step into a sovereign, divine, feminine form. And then align yourself with embodied characteristics of divinity if that is your intention. Otherwise, you're just going to be another human animal, essentially, having a psychedelic experience where you see colors and you roll around and you have the experience of physical release, but you're never going to truly understand the reasons why you have an internal knowing on a higher spiritual plane, higher level. It's stepping into yourself. It's stepping into your power. And the only way to step into your power is to stop going on a surface level with yourself. It's to study yourself and to marvel at yourself so that you remember the spiritual being or the celestial body that's beneath the physical and spiritual body. A lot of us tap into the physical. We can feel around our environment, we can feel energy, right? And so we're tapping into the physical body on mushrooms. Then you start seeing different auras around people and you start seeing colors and stuff. You're tapping into your spiritual body. But a lot of people will never make it to the celestial body because the physical body and the spiritual body both need purification for you to be able to see that deeply into your soul, which is what we call soul retrieval practices. And not everyone will ever have that opportunity. So it's really important for you, if you're working with the mushroom, to work with it at a dose that you can do some serious work on release before you go to the higher doses. So if you do like 2 or 3 or 4 grams to start with, then as you progress in your purification practice of letting go, letting thought forms go, letting social norms go, letting things that are obstacles in your life, assessing them and making life changes so that you can have less stress, so that you can have a better life, that's part of the process and the path to accessing your higher self and your higher self form. And just because you've accessed it doesn't end there, because there's celestial training that comes with it. You might say, oh, I'm all set, or oh, I'm Isis, or oh, I'm Freya, or it's some goddess archetype that you read in a book that you feel you really resonate with. You felt that spirit come through you on the mushroom. That does not matter if you are not embodying her divine aspects on a daily basis. That's the mental health. Who taught you it was okay to just be happy with being angry, afraid, hateful, and grievous? Is that what you want to be? No? I'm just asking the group, like, really, do you want to be angry, hateful, filled with grief, anxiety? Okay, so you want the opposite of that, right? Kindness, love, happiness. You want to be friendly to people in your community. In Africa, you're not judged on how smart you are. You're judged on how well you can function in a community, right? It's whether you take care of those around you and you're kind to them and you're gentle to them, right? Those are divine feminine qualities. This isn't some woo-woo stuff. This is some basic level stuff. Do you want to be better than you are right now? Do you want to access the highest version of yourself? Then you've got to give yourself an audience. You've got to observe yourself. Because if you're not observing yourself, I can promise you that the people in your life are observing you and they may not be liking what they're seeing. So it's really important to step into that inner eye, that inner wisdom. And this is what I'm talking about when I say sight. Stepping back outside of what you think is going on inside of your body. Let's say you're Googling 1 million plants right now and you've got like 20 on your list that you think are going to help you. Step back from that, meditate, breathe, and take some mushrooms. And if you take the mushroom and you stay in that spot where you're not carrying your baggage with you, don't carry your victimhood into your trip. Come in with the expectation that you are going to transmute that victimhood, okay? And that's on an everyday level. That's like, so-and-so pissed me off, I'm dealing with this right now. So-and-so pissed me off, okay, I'm dealing with this. I'm doulaing myself in this reality without the mushroom. So I'm learning how to treat myself as an adult with adult behaviors and adult belief systems, instead of treating myself as a little girl. Because when you treat yourself as a little kid, you say, okay, well, you know, this happened, so we got to call mommy. You know, and the call mommy syndrome is pretty useful. If your mom's alive, you can call. I called my mom, and my mom talked to me, and I was like, well, all right, well, okay, I need to really sit with this. But if you just sit with it, you don't have to go 5 steps to where you spread it all out, spread all the negative energy around to your friends and to your coworkers. You can just sit with it and transmute it. And that's what we strive as female practitioners to do, is to learn how to be alchemists of negative energy. Learn how to transmute those thoughts in your head that are filled with anger and grief and hatred, and remove justification. Because if we justify it, that is the worst quality. That's not forgiveness. Justification is not forgiveness. We can justify our anger all we want, but that's just going to keep it there. So there's no point in justifying your anger. The only thing that we can do with it is hold it. Hold space for it and release it. Tremble, shake, cry, bawl, complain. Whatever ways that you can get it out, it may not look pretty, but we have to hold space for it. And that's why it's so important that you get alone time as a woman. So, going back to my own story, this is the process I've been going through every day for the last 11 years of my life. It's a mystery school in of itself, because when you study the traditions, can anyone tell me what the oldest domesticated plant is in the world, or fruit is in the world? Don't answer this. I'll give you a hint. It's for women's problems. No. Pomegranate. Since 5th century CE, it's been domesticated. When the Israelites went to Israel, you know what the scouts said when they checked out the land? They said there's a lot of pomegranates there. Why do you think it's called the Fertile Crescent?
Eggs. Looks like eggs.
Yeah, well, that is interesting. That's a good point. It also looks like ovaries and eggs. Yes, but I was talking about Mesopotamia. Why do you think Mesopotamia is called? But I was trying to think, like, the country looks like eggs. Damn. Damn Israel. All right, yeah, but that too. Any of these plants, what this brother is touching on is pretty deep, because in my experience, all of these herbs are a communication system with the human body. The shape of the plant, the color of the plant, the taste of the plant. Your earliest ancestors weren't looking on Wikipedia to find out what these herbs did. They were putting it in their mouth and chewing it. Said, this is bitter, this is for the heart. This is sour, this is for the gallbladder. This is yellow, this is for the gallbladder. Or the spleen. This is green, all right, the fruit is green and it's bitter. Okay, this might be good for the liver. You know, and say if it's white, it might be good for the lungs. This is where traditional Chinese medicine isn't just traditional Chinese medicine. Traditional Egyptian medicine also has 5 colors, 5 organs. Ayurvedic medicine, I think, has like six colors or 6 sections, but it also has 5 organs. All these traditional systems that come from sense, taste, smell, hearing, sight of these herbs, the herbs are communicating with us to our bodies. We know that walnut is good for the brain because it's shaped like brains. Pomegranate is good for the ovaries because the seeds look like eggs inside the ovaries, but it's also red. And it's also shaped like the womb. Its whole shape looks like the womb. You turn it upside down, it looks like a uterus with a vagina pointing downward, with the cervix pointing downward. The cervix is the top of the fruit. And so when you open up a pomegranate, the first thing you'll notice is that it's very juicy. And it's also a little bit bittersweet. But the main capability of the pomegranate is for fertility. And even in the story of Persephone and Hades, where Persephone has a pomegranate tree, these stories were told as female mystery systems. These stories weren't just told as mythology. That's what we were told. These are just myths. But in the myths were stories that were important for young women to read so that they could learn about the herbs that would eventually cure their issues. Do you know what is required? What vitamin is required 2,000 milligrams of for a woman to get pregnant? Can anyone tell me in this room? Yes. How much folic acid does a cup of pomegranate juice have? 2,000 milligrams. When you Google what you need to get pregnant, it doesn't say pomegranate juice now, does it? No. You need to be drinking, as a woman, you need to be drinking at least a cup a day of pomegranate juice or some other folate-containing substance if you are already folate deficient. And most of us don't get enough folate out of our diets. And so this is one of the first herbs that I started working with. I've loved pomegranate since I was like 6 years old. And pomegranate is what ends up saving your life, because if you eat pomegranate juice or drink pomegranate juice when you have a yeast infection, what happens? Yeast infection starts to go away. Why? Because it's antibacterial, antimicrobial. It has vitamin C in it. It is the anti-candida yeast. So we're fighting against this bacteria that has the ability to take over the body and also cause terrible menstrual cramps, while at the same time making PCOS, fibroid tumors, and endometriosis worse, because it does attack the uterine lining. We know this because when we eat a lot of bread and we eat a lot of sugar, that yeast not only feeds on the bread in our gut, it also goes into our colon. And if your colon is even slightly attached to your uterus, that means that that bacteria is going to travel into your uterine lining and your uterine wall and cause inflammation and give you a yeast infection. That's why when you get a yeast infection, sometimes you start pooping white stuff. Just like it's coming out of one hole, it's going to come out the other, because it's taking over. And we don't correlate the two. We say, okay, if you got a yeast infection, that's a yeast infection. Go over here, go to Walmart, go into the women's section, grab the monostat, stick it up there, and you'll be fine. But that's not the goal. We have herbs that work on this. I've worked with nettle, I've worked with red clover, I've worked with red dates. There's a lot of blood purifiers that you can use, and then also eating a diet that does not include white bread and sugar. Getting that out of your diet at least 50 to 60% of the time will save you a trip to a doctor, just based on how much yeast consumes those two things in your body. I can feel it when I eat any sort of bread in my vagina immediately. If I eat it, I'm like, okay, all right, I know what I need to do next. I had some lemongrass tea the other day because I ate a giant piece of focaccia bread this big. I was like, okay, let me drink some lemongrass tea. And guess what? The lemongrass is antifungal and anti-candidal. So it knocked it right out before it could ever cause a problem, because everyone has a little bit of yeast in their system. If you've ever eaten bread, you have candida yeast. So since it's something that we all deal with, because we all live in an area where, unless you have celiac disease, even if you have celiac disease, if you're eating some sort of rice flour or oat flour, potato flour, you still could get a yeast infection because it feeds on sugar primarily, but you're not putting yeast into your body unless it has a leavening agent. So eating unleavened bread, there's something to that in the Bible, eating unleavened bread, because the leavening agent is yeast. So what happens when you have a yeast-high diet? You have a cloudy mind. You're not able to stay focused. You're not able to remember what you were supposed to do. You lose your keys. You're dropping everything. I've had issues with yeast my whole life. So for me, dealing with endometriosis was one half dealing with yeast, the other half dealing with trauma. And so I had to find herb that could help me deal with both, and also a tradition or a spiritual system to help me deal with both. So for me, it was taking the mushroom and then going online and trying to find different areas that had really good midwifery techniques. I wanted to find the tribes that had the best technique for healing different uterine issues. And the sad part is, most people only see the word sex. So most of these herbs get put down as sex tonics. They get put down as aphrodisiacs, but they're not just aphrodisiacs because they cure things like yeast infections. They're considered aphrodisiacs. Because are you horny when you got a yeast infection? No, hell no. You can't get, nah. It ain't thin. And if you say it's thin, you're lying. It ain't that bad. It wasn't that bad. You don't get your boyfriend all messed up too, because he get yeast infections. The worst part is he'll just keep drinking beer and eating sugar, and he won't know he got a yeast infection because his discharge already white. You know, I mean, it might cause some dryness. But man, what'd you eat? Like, it's dry down there. But for the most part, men don't know when they have a yeast infection. So it's really important why you should watch what your man eats. Because if he's over there eating a bunch of bread and sugar, and then you sleep with him, you wondering why your pH is off, it's because he done put battery acid in your vagina. That's why it's just as important to keep track of the alkaline eating habits of your spouse or your man when you're doing that. It doesn't apply to just men, it also applies to women. You go down another woman, she has a yeast infection, you're going to catch it too. Because the aggressive form of Candida albicans that's in her vagina has now taken over your system in a matter of 24 hours as soon as your lips make contact. So it applies to both male and women. So you can't get out of it. So you gotta learn how to treat it. And that's just the way it is. So Gorgonzola is one that really caught my eye. It took me years to really find it and actually start working with it, because everywhere I looked it was sold as a sexual aphrodisiac. And these aphrodisiacs like Damiana helps treat yeast infections. Damiana is an aphrodisiac, but it's also healing for the heart. It's also nourishing for the body. All these herbs that are being known for these 1 or 2 qualities have 20, 30, 40 other qualities if you actually put any amount of time and effort into looking into them. That's what I'm saying. Get off the bullet train. Get on the sidewalk. Take your time. Gorgonzola is famous because it comes from the town of Tula, the Gorong area of Tula in Ghana. And when you go to Ghana, all these families, all the Tula families of that area have specific kind of Gorgonzola trees. And so they know that if you pick some Gorgonzola and you chew one on it and it has a specific kind of rind that it came from their tree, they can have you arrested and say, oh, he stole from my Gorgonzola tree. Because it's such a fertility tonic that the men, women, and children there, they all collect it. They collect it to make money. Because they know that when they chew that fruit, if you have a yeast infection, it's going to knock it out within 2 to 4 hours because it's so antibacterial. It creates a slime. They call it snot apple. So it tastes like brown sugar. You chew on it, or it's in a powder, and you mix it with hot water. And the way that it works is that it adds a viscous antibacterial layer to the inside of your intestines. So just like slippery elm helps heal intestinal issues by sealing up ulcerations in the intestinal lining, could be caused by endometriosis. When you feel your uterus starting to rip off the wall of your colon, you can't take a poop or anything, you got gas, bloating, it feels like there's being knives stuck into your rectum. I don't care. Like people ask me like, oh, you like martial arts? I'm like, I do martial arts once a month, every month. Sometimes there's bloodshed. Sometimes I feel like I done died. I come home, I'm messed up. My endometriosis was so bad when I was a child, I used to grab the carpet and leave holes in the carpet because I was pulling the carpet up off the floor. I used to sit there, I would vomit all over the carpet, then I'd crawl to the bathroom, and I'd be hugging the toilet. My whole body would be wrapped around the toilet and just clawing at it like an animal because I was so far out of my mind in pain. I would just grab the Advil, take the whole bottle, throw the whole bottle in my mouth. That's why I had liver problems. People wonder, why don't you drink, Acacia? Oh, I don't know. I abused pain pills to the point that my liver practically stopped functioning at age 15. You know, like the level to which I abused pain, I'm so glad no one ever gave me opioids because I would have been one of them opioid addicts. Because the pain was so excruciating that I didn't even want to go to the hospital because I knew they were going to take my uterus out. And I know that what I have is precious and I want to pass it on. So people say, okay, well, you were embarrassed about your, having a Bartholin's tumor and you couldn't conceive or you couldn't have penetrative sex. So now you did Cambo. Now you got rid of it. I did Cambo for about 3.5 months. And I did it 2 dots, then 4 dots, then 6 dots, then 8 dots, then 10 dots. And for doing Cambo, it's a lot. You get to about the 4th gate of doing Cambo, and what happened? Tell me what happened. You start puking. Yeah. because the dermoseptin goes in and it starts killing all the yeast in your gut, starts killing all the yeast in your mind. You start having visions and prophetic. I remember the first time I did Cambo, I looked outside, I was looking through the ground. I could see the roots of the trees pulsing in rainbow-like colors. I could feel the energy radiating off the trees. I was like, man, this is the biggest dupe I've been through in my life. I was like, all these people talking about spiritualism and can't see because they got a fog 10 millimeters thick over their eyeballs of yeast. You take it off, it's like, oh wow, the aura of that plant's talking to me right now. And everybody thinks you're crazy because now you become hyper spiritual. Because now you can see everything that you thought you could feel before, real time. Sometimes it's not that intense, but sometimes you get to the 8th gate, you go into a trance. And what happens when you get to the 8th gate? You're gone. You're sitting there on the floor. You're laying on your side. You got drool hanging out your mouth. You got a puddle of vomit over there. And you are gone. You are in a psychedelic experience. And it's not a regular kind of psychedelic. No, it's a frog trance where you out in the jungle, in the tree, going, ribbit, ribbit. They come around, they're like, oh, you came, like, ribbit. And then you come back into your body, and you're like, whoa, everything's different now. And so you do that for about 3 months, and then what happened was my Bartholins got even bigger because it started breaking down the calcium and proteins and the complex protein chains that had solidified inside my Bartholins tumor. So I asked my teacher, I was like, I can't walk today. I was walking like this down the hallway. And he was like, I don't want to, my teacher didn't want, he was a grown man, big old Native American guy who trained in Mexico. He was like, I'm not looking down there, no. You deal with that yourself. With Campbell's, it'll do the medicine work. So I had to take myself home, get a sterile hypodermic needle, and lance it myself. And man, when that came out, I swear to God, I've seen a dead body before, but it smelled worse. It smelled a lot worse. And it was painful too. But it had broken down all of that hard tumor to that, it was liquid. It was like squeezing toothpaste out, and it was like that for like 2 hours, and my partner was sitting there grabbing napkin after napkin, just gagging at the smell of like what smelled like dead human coming out of me, and I was just sitting there just crying my eyes out, so happy that for the first time in life I had seen my own junk. And that's something that a lot of people have a privilege of. A lot of you guys who can't relate, saying like, that's intense. Yeah, it was really intense. But the same thing was happening inside me too. When I had my first period after Cambo, I've never seen blood that looked so red. How many of you guys have had brown discharge before? And like dark, like thick, maroon discharge and stuff. It was fresh. The blood was fresh. And there were chunks of tissue coming out that had been overgrown inside of my uterus. So when I had miscarried the first time and all the miscarriage didn't come out, that started coming out after Cambo. When I had my first time getting ripped from endometriosis and there was tissue hanging loose in my uterus, like your uterus is sensitive. It's very sensitive. If you take a pomegranate and you decide to start shaving layers off of it, it starts to wear through to where you can see the fruit. Your uterus is very same. A lot of folks have ulcerative holes in their uterus and don't even know it. Or fibroid tumors so thick and so dense that it's like you got a whole nother uterus growing on your uterus, but it's a fibroid. And so what's important for me is when if you drink pomegranate juice every day, it'll start cleaning your blood out so that the bacteria that's inflaming the fibroids starts to calm down. But how do you shrink the actual fibroids? Broccoli seed and cruciferous vegetables. That's another thing I started doing after Cambo is I went on my first raw food fast. And now a lot of people take it way too far. I don't agree with people who say, oh, you're supposed to go raw your whole life. Because I don't know, I come from some meat-eating, Paleolithic, sub-Saharan peoples, and they want some lamb sometimes. And so I give them some lamb. So I don't want my teeth to fall out. No, for real. you know? And so for me, the broccoli seeds contain sulforaphanes. If you look up on the internet, you can find a bunch of sulforaphane containing foods that start shrinking the fibroid tumors up to 10% within the first 2 weeks. All right, now it's not that much. So there's the diet aspect that you can start integrating, but then you also have shallots. Shallots can start cleaning your blood as well. You add shallots to your salad. You know, eating raw onion. Like my friend, she said her grandpa was how old?
106.
106 years old. Eating what?
Raw onions.
Raw onion.
Yeah.
Because it clean the what?
Blood.
Cleans the blood. You know, we have to get very organized about the way that we use herbs. I think a lot of times the reason why people don't think that herbs work is because you try it inconsistently, and you try it in the wrong amount inconsistently, and you don't get the results you're looking for. So what I'm telling you right now is if you take 1 teaspoon of broccoli seed every other day for a month, all right, you got to be consistent. That's a serving size. You take at least 1 cup of pomegranate juice a week. I'm not going to tell you I'll do it every day, even though you know better. Maybe y'all don't want babies, though. So if you want to be hyper fertile, then just drink it as much as you can. Get raw pomegranate. You see Palm, the brand Palm? You can go and get pomegranate juice cold pressed. You can buy your own pomegranate. And when pomegranate's not in season, what's another fruit that you can think of that can help? Papaya. Because papaya seed is a what? Anti-parasitic. So all you gotta do is eat like 2 or 3 papaya seeds. Put them out to dry when you make the papaya. You open it up, and papaya is good for menstruation and fibroid tumors. And so is mango. All right, and so are yams. All right, so this is, you can start making a diet. I'm gonna make you guys a cookbook. When I post it, I'm gonna post it for free. All right, I didn't have time before this event to make you an every single day diet. But I'm doing it for myself, so as I do it, I'm going to share it with you. Now, here's a key about broccoli sprouts that they won't tell you. They contain 400 times more sulforaphanes. The sulforaphane is what cleanses the blood and shrinks the fibroid tumors, according to NCBI's medical research papers. You can look this up. But when you sprout it, it contains 400 times more. So if you go on the internet and you buy organic broccoli seed and you sprout it, it takes 5 days from start to finish to sprout broccoli seeds. Me and Acacea did not have enough time, so when y'all eat your salad, you're going to be eating overnight oats. Overnight broccoli seed. But it's still really good for you, okay? And so I want you to make a habit of eating kale sprouts, broccoli sprouts, sunflower seed sprouts. That all contains nutrients that your body needs to break those fibroids down fast. I had an acupuncturist come up to me after the Detroit Entheogenic Conference in Miami. He said, you know what happened for my wife? You know how doctor said she'd never conceive. Never ever conceive. And he said, you know, what she did? I said, what, broccoli seed? He said, yeah. How did you know? I was like, that's what worked for me. You know, like from here on out for the next 5 years, I'm planning for my physical body. This is a part of my own growth and maturity in the female mystery system that I'm in as a woman. And so for 5 years before you have a kid, if you actually impart these processes, then your child should come out having less chance of genetic defects, less chance of carrying on fibroid tumors, less chance of carrying on genetics, because every 6 months, your DNA is going to change as a part of this process. So you're literally changing yourself on a DNA level when you start implementing these spiritual and physical principles. Spiritually, because you're changing your behavior. And we know that behaviorally based genetics is a real thing. So people can't say, oh, you just some spiritual stuff. You decided to change the way you think, and now your genetics changed. No, you started changing the way you behave. And the way that you behave changed your stress levels. And those stress and hormone levels start producing a new strand of DNA. So it's going to cause your behaviors to become more permanent over a long period of time. Behavioral and lifestyle change does overall change your genetics after a while. So that's why after you've gone through this, putting a buffer in between of 2 to 5 years helps you not to carry on those genetic abnormalities to your children. Because if you have HPV and you give birth, guess what? Your kid can what? Get it. If you have herpes and you don't take that time to actually, they say herpes isn't curable. Well, I beg to differ. I actually had a boyfriend thinking, okay, well, it's time for me to have kids. let me go ahead and get somebody who I really trust and respect, and we're going to go ahead and start a family. This was several years ago. And he had 2 kinds of herpes, 2 kinds of HPV, 2 kinds of herpes. And I had to learn how to combat and deal with that. And so God's blessed me, or Spirit's blessed me, whatever you call it. The mystery has blessed me with many, many sicknesses and many, many challenges very, very young. And so a lot of people say, don't ask for wisdom because you might have to what? Pay the price. The price for me has been many sicknesses. I've gone to the extreme with herpes because it was very difficult for me to cure. But I had to work with different cobra toxin, different types of serpent medicine, because after I worked with Campbell for several years, became a Campbell practitioner and teacher, and taught a whole class, then it was time for me to go, to the next level. Okay, well, what's the next level? I gotta go and seek out the folks who have been working with Fer-de-Lance, which eats the Campbell frog. It's the only snake, big enough and bad enough, it's the only known predator of the Campbell frog, because every other predator is gonna vomit it up and go look for other prey. But no, the Fer-de-Lance actually neutralizes the Campbell frog's venom. So it has a peptide it's produced that neutralizes the nauseating effects of the Campbell frog's poison. So when you do Fer-de-Lance and Campbell, you don't get nauseous. You still vomit, but you don't feel any nausea or physical discomfort. So the Cuadernos in Peru, who are around Brazilian pit viper a lot, they work with it as a traditional medicine. And so if you go down to Peru, and no, I don't have this, and no, I can't practice it, so if you got herpes, you will have to go and find the folks in Peru. But I'm telling you, it exists. There are studies from many different universities showing that Brazilian pit viper venom is active against different cancer constituents. And no, do not go out and get your own snake. I already told some folks this, but they didn't listen. I'm serious. Herpes make you do all sorts of crazy things. But the truth is, like when you go into your mushroom trip, Dormammu, the being, I think my ex thought it was Doctor Strange, because Dormammu is the being that's self-replicating. And you know, you see in the movie Doctor Strange when it come out and its face is rippling in every direction. Well, that's how it feels when you are on mushrooms and you got herpes, is that it's rippling in every direction, trying to get into every cell, and you in a time loop with it, just trying to fight it and fight against it. But no, it's impaired your memory and your thinking functions. And until it gets out of there, you're still going to have those impairments. And it's very scary. So to be completely undetectable and to release it completely from your system takes months of work. And it's not easy. I have scars, maybe 5 layers thick on my chest, and a full neck band from where I had to go get full initiation with the cobra venom, full with the water moccasin venom, because they contain peptides that help to go and attack the nerve cells where the herpes is hiding without damaging the nerve cell walls. And that's what other medicines can't do. Because these snakes cure their prey before they kill their prey. So the snake doesn't want to eat something that's got a disease because it can't process the disease out. It's just going to straight up and die. So the snake's compassion comes in its venom. The frog's compassion comes in its venom. The venom of the green monkey tree frog, if you take Campbell venom and you have herpes or HPV, it will start keeping those things at bay. It will not cure those things. It won't cure your cancer, but it can help kill the bacteria that's feeding sugars to your cancer to cause it to grow and allow you to treat the cancer with other natural herbs and solutions. And I think that that's important. So, going back to the issue of my own journey with fibroid tumors, the next thing I had to do when I was self-medicating with Advil and lots of different types of over-the-counter NSAIDs was I used flying cream. How many have heard of flying cream? Okay, how many of you heard of which? Raise your hands. Just so I can. Yeah. All right, so you seen the one riding on a broomstick? Well, you know where that comes from? That comes from different stories about women in the Middle Ages who were taking different poisonous herbs that were onerogens, meaning dream herbs, or astral projection herbs, like Amanita muscaria. That's a psychedelic. Taking henbane, nightshade, datura, brugmansia, and making creams out of them. And then they'd rub them on their genitalia and go and astrally fly through the night. Got 5 minutes. And so because it's got opium in it and datura in it, datura is a women's herb. When you eat the datura seed, and I'm not recommending you do this because it's a nightshade, meaning that it's in a family of herbs where Baba Kalindi said, don't become Darth Vader. They will challenge you. Many women get seduced by the nightshades and develop dark proclivities. And they're like, okay, I want to be your sexual therapist. You're like, oh. That's kidding. But when it comes down to it, there are challenges. These herbs will challenge you and say, oh, well, can I get you to break this bond? Can I get you to break that? Because these are rites of women's passage. If you're in a traditional rite of passage, you do not want to be caught failing. And so when you're working with these sacred herbs, expect them to challenge your beliefs. Expect them to challenge your ego. And expect them to cause you to go into strange and altered states to where you do not remember the person that you were because you are rebuilding your personality from scratch. These are not meant to keep you the way that you are. And that's the biggest problem that we have in psychedelics, that people want the healing but don't want to die in the process. You're not going to make it out alive anyway, so you may as well just go ahead and die and become better. That's the way I see it. So, in closing, I got 5 minutes left. The Gorantula is so important because the amount of infertility caused by fibroids in Africa is 2 to 3 times the population of anywhere else in the world. Even America, 2 to 3 times more black women have fibroids than anywhere else in the world because of genetics, mostly. Not just because of BMI, not just because of physical. You go to Africa, you'll find a lot of women in shape, but the Gorantula has different constituents that are good for whooping cough, asthma, diabetes, blood sugar. It cures candida yeast, and it also starts shrinking fibroid tumors. You can look this up on the internet if you look up the actual name of it, which I'll share with you guys afterwards, the Latin name. It's Azana garciana, and it sounds funny, but you can find it pretty easily. I got 2 minutes left. And so another herb is red clover and vitex. But the problem with vitex is if you have PCOS and you're producing different hormones that are too much, like progesterone, it can produce too many more hormones. That's why I didn't say it earlier. But if you don't have PCOS, you can work with red clover pretty easily. But you have to look for luteinizing hormone. If you're producing too high of luteinizing hormone and you get your blood panel done, then you don't need to be taking red whole clover because it'll make your condition worse. That's why Gorantula is important, is because it doesn't necessarily work on the hormones directly. All right, it works on strengthening the blood flow of your uterus, giving the viscosity of fluid so that you can naturally start relaxing the muscles in the uterine wall so that the fibroids can be reabsorbed into the uterus as healthy tissue rather than cut out. Because if you cut it out, then you're going to have issues when your body finally does relax and release, and then you're going to have ulceration and tearing as a result, and they're also going to tell you you're infertile. So don't go cut it out. Go and relax it out. Relax it out by using antibacterial tonics. And those antibacterial tonics will kill bacteria that inflame the fibroids even worse, okay? And then you have things like white peony, which are really easy to find. Go find peony flower pressed on the internet or peony root. Both of those will help balance the hormones and be phytoestrogenic. Cassip fatima is another plant. Cassip fatima is what women in Malaysia use. You've ever seen a Malaysian woman with really long, beautiful hair, or black hair that's very smooth? Cassip fatima is a plant that all schoolgirls and older women will go out into the field and try to pick to make some money because they know that if they hand it to someone who has issues like we do in America with fibroid tumors, etc., it has dozens of studies showing 30% shrinkage of fibroid tumors. And I got 100-to-1 extract on the table in the back if you want to get a sample of it. All right, so that is, in my conclusion, some plants and herbs and practices that you can implement to fight fibroids and endometriosis. Thank you. What is serotonin control? Learning and memory. What is dopamine control?
Is it mood?
Energy, aging, and motivation. So if you're aging kind of fast for your age, you might be a little dopamine deficient. you might have gone through something so traumatic that now your body does not release the appropriate amount of dopamine at the time that it was appointed to. So you do other things, maybe adrenaline chasing, or living a certain kind of lifestyle because it brings you happiness, because the things that used to bring you happiness can't bring you happiness anymore because you're not releasing dopamine the way that your brain used to when you were a child before you went through certain traumatic events that caused your body to release cortisol in normal, regular situations, which is why you have anxiety when you're just sitting still doing nothing. Anyway, I'm trying to get too deep. But on a very real note, it's really important to know what serotonin does because we have memories associated with food. Who remembers their mom's cooking or cooking up their friend, their aunt, or their family? Those memories trigger happy thoughts, and those happy thoughts bring us comfort. And so serotonin is stored in your gut. That means that the things that you really like to eat are also connected to your overall happiness. So it's really important to pay attention to your serotonin health by eating things that have tryptophan. Did you know that if you take banana peel and you put it in and make a tea, banana peel tea is what mothers have used to calm down babies for a long time, but they calm down because they have what? Tryptophan. Tryptophan is the precursor to serotonin. Serotonin is the precursor to melatonin. Melatonin is the precursor to 5-MeO-DMT. So it's really important that you practice a lifestyle where you get at least your balanced amount of tryptophan and your balanced amount of choline. Because if you don't have choline, then you don't have the proper amounts of dopamine. Choline is what comes from rice and eggs. How many of y'all like rice and eggs? I like rice and eggs pretty much. But 90% of children who are autistic are choline deficient. That should tell you something right there. So choline comes from a food source that you can only get enough choline as if you eat a bucket full of rice and a bucket full of eggs. And so ball went rolling. And so unless you're going to eat a bucket full of rice and a bucket full of eggs, then you're not going to get your daily value of choline if you're already choline deficient because you didn't grow up eating that kind of food. So what is choline? What is acetylcholine agonist? Marijuana. If you smoke weed, then you are agonizing your acetylcholine system, meaning that you're using up your acetylcholine. So that means that when you eat choline, like as a supplement, and then you smoke weed for the first time after, it's going to be like you've never smoked weed in your life. Because all that time, your brain was releasing amounts of choline, and it was being agonized by the THC molecule. So a lot of people don't understand, if you eat grapefruit and you smoke weed, the bergamine, the bergamot, and the grapefruit peel also increases the chance of fake memories or memory loss. Wow. So it's really important to know what you're working with. If you're working with cannabis, then you should be eating more rice and eggs. If you don't eat rice and eggs, then you should go over the counter and get some choline. Because that tolerance, once it's built up, is indicative of the fact that your red blood cells are hiding the THC receptors. So they're hiding from it. And you come and like, I guess I gotta smoke more. And they're like, I'm hiding from it. And the choline will help the surface of the red blood cells to produce more THC receptors so that you can actually enjoy the feeling of being high. Otherwise, it's never going to be good as it was at first. So anyway, without further ado, I'm open for questions.
How many times should you actually do the colon flush? Because I heard
twice a week for 8 weeks. And that's if you want to be completely cleaned out. I've done it. I can't say I've done that, by the way. I've done it like twice a week. How many times a week should I do a colon hydrotherapy? I didn't say colon cleanse. You can do this as an enema at home. You can go and get a bag and sit it on the towel rack and lay down with your butt out and put it in and get all filled up with warm water and say, okay, I think it's done. And go and sit on the toilet and go, and release it all. You can do that too, like 6 or 7 times and get pretty good effects. But when you have a colon hydrotherapist do it, like I said, they massage your internal organs, at least they're supposed to if they're worth their salt. Tell me you didn't get your money's worth. In case you said you didn't get your money's worth, they don't do that. You know, they go in and they massage all the nooks and crannies and release the different crusts and blockages from your intestines so you can finally emit all of that out. And then a lot of times the fibroid tumors will start shrinking because you have less bacterial biofilm and bacteria that's affecting your uterus that's connected between the gut and the uterus balance. A lot of people don't understand there's a connection between the two. Doctors might say, we don't understand that, we don't think that candida, a yeast infection, can affect fibroids. Well, of course it does, because we know that the yeast infection causes inflammation, right? And the fibroids are also affected by inflammation. So if you've got an inflammatory disease and fibroid tumors, we know that the two compound together. So it's really important to pay attention to the antibacterial foods we put in our body so you don't end up with a yeast overgrowth. And also it's really important to pay attention to the kind of diet that you're eating and what's sitting in your intestines before you go to the doctor and say, I don't know what to do. If you don't go and get cleaned out, then clean yourself out. And you can clean yourself out a number of ways. You can eat prunes, prune juice. You do it the old way, but it's still important sometimes to remove those blockages because we eat food that contains a lot of really strange things our ancestors didn't necessarily eat. You might still have, part of some Red Lobster cheese biscuits stuck in. I don't have Red Lobster out here, but it seems like a brick. So, you want to make sure that you clean that out. So anyway, without further ado, does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Just want to know more about mushrooms in general, but would you recommend microdosing?
Yes.
Do you think it's more effective to do a retreat where you...
I don't think it's more effective to do a retreat. In fact, I think that there are some retreats that are good, but ultimately the way that I was taught was to do it as someone who is studying oneself privately in a room in the dark by yourself, or with a sitter the first couple of times. With a sitter the first couple of times is kind of required. Why? Because if you decide that you want to go and get in the car, you need somebody to stop you and say, no, you're not going out there. We took your keys, we took your phone, we took it away. You might be like, I got to talk to my mom right now. And they're like, no, you can't have your phone until you come down. You're going to really think about what you're about to say later and maybe soften it a little bit. So, you want to make sure that you're not going to be saying, I love you so much and I hate you for what you did to me as a kid. Oh my God, I need to tell you something about yourself. So it's for me, the mushroom is a tool. Do you go to a retreat center to learn how to use a tool? Sometimes, if you're going to build a house. What are you planning to do? If you want to be a part of community and you want to be supported by community, there are Darren back there, he got all kinds of retreats, don't you, Darren? You got like 6 retreats you said you work with, right? He can hook you up with retreats if you want to be a part of a community and help build a house. All right, but if you're trying to build your own future, you're trying to focus on yourself, which is what I think that anybody who starts off should be doing to start, is working on themselves and learning about themselves. There's nothing wrong with you starting off with like 0.25 microdose on a Saturday night. Turn on some Acacea or some some Amapiano. Chill out, turn on The Simpsons, laugh a little bit, I feel better, and then when you're ready to do the deep work, you turn that TV off, you turn that music off, and you sit in the dark and you deal with yourself. You feel me? Yeah, you deal with your darkness. And then when you're like, okay, I think I'm ready for a real dose, and then what you're gonna do is you're gonna sit there with that man right there, is your partner.
He already does this.
And he's probably going to say, okay, honey, do you have everything you need? Your partner's going to say, yes, but you're not supposed to believe her. You're supposed to have a water. You're supposed to have a warm towel. You're supposed to have a bath drawn. You're supposed to have some incense going. And you're supposed to have your playlist ready in case she has a moment where she's upset. He'll learn how to support you. Hopefully you'll learn how to support him, over time as a couple, because eventually you may get to a point where you want to do some marriage counseling. You do 9 grams together, but that's probably way far off. So, that's part of it. So, yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Anybody else got a question? Go ahead.
I think it's quite relevant. I don't think I've ever heard a man talk about pain during sex, but women talk about it all the time. So can you speak more to pain during intercourse and things like that? Anything to go?
Do you want me to talk about, okay, so I gotta ask the question again. Do Do you want me to try and answer the question about men having pain during sex or women having pain?
Women.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
saying I've never really heard men say that.
Okay, I have.
You have? That's interesting.
Some women have scary vaginas. All right, so women having pain during sex. Sex for me has been a very interesting thing. Like I can't really say that I've ever gotten to the point where I'm just like crazy about it, because there was a time where it was very painful. And so it was a sacrifice, you know. You want to make somebody happy, like, all right, come get it. And you waiting for it to get over, and it's over, and you're finally fine. Just shut up. You know? But once you finally get to a point where you healed yourself and you can enjoy it and it feels great, and you love it and you enjoy it, you want penetration, that's great. But there's a long walk through the desert in between, you know, where you're going to have to reject a lot of sex while you are healing. I think a lot of times women are afraid to say, look, temple's closed. You're going to have to be crying outside the front doors of that temple for at least another month until I get it together. And they're afraid of the rejection that comes from saying that. And so I think what's really important is if you start having pain during sex, stop having sex for at least a period of a month. Because what that tells you is that the fibroids have gotten bad enough to cause a nerve pressure. And that nerve, if you rupture some blood vessels, or you make, if your partner is not sensitive to how you're feeling and you're expecting it to be more sensitive to how you're feeling. I've tried reasoning with a man who said he loved me very much about how rough he was being towards me when I was having pain. And no matter what, his penis can't become your vagina. No matter how kind he is, he can't intuitively just say, oh, I know what spot is going to hit, unless he's really, 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 really paying attention. And so that's why I'm like, just cease. And then go ahead and do the work. When you take the mushroom, you can inquire within. That window to the womb is what I started talking about, but I didn't get deep into it. We have tools like the Ankh. You know, in Hermeticism, the Ankh can be used as a window to the womb. You hold that Ankh in front of your womb. That open circle represents that space inside you. And you can meditate, close your eyes, and place your consciousness inside that womb space. And just like you said something cool, I'm going to quote you again. Something about like playing not doctor. What was that game? Operation? To play a game where you try to visualize what's inside that space. You see there's a bone on the side, there's something here that shouldn't be there. You know, intuitively meditating with a microdose or a high dose. For me, I go in a high dose. If I'm going and doing my womb work, I got to step into the form. You know, but that's a whole nother woman's mystery system. Is when you embody oneself, you embody the divine qualities of that self that you are going into to become. So, like, let's say if I want to work with Isis. I'm not going in to go worship Isis and say, please, God, just teach me about myself. No, I'm going in so that the spirit of Isis can reconfigure me, you know, and I can rework those energies with the Ankh. Now, not everybody can do that. I understand that it's a learning curve for that. So it's really important that if you're not going to do some sort of visualization practice, to at least do some sort of meditation practice and self-inquiry so that you can start observing how your womb responds to different touches and touching yourself, getting to know where there's tenderness, and where you find tenderness, sending positive energy into those areas to start pushing out at least the spiritual body component, the negative energy component that comes from thought forms and behaviors, etc., out of that area. That's what you can do without any herbs, without any medicine, without anybody teaching you anything. You can simply get more in tune with your body. Now, that's not probably going to solve the issue immediately. It could take a long time if you do it